Welcome to Tinker Tailor Gamer Scribe. Where we left off, I said I was going to design some gears as a backup for the ball elevator for the Pachinko machine. So here I am doing that. I decided on two basic variations for my homemade ones. Since they're going to be 3D printed, I figured I would cover my bases, I guess, for the lack of a better way to put it, and make two different forms. It'll make more sense when you see the first one and the second one next to each other. But basically what it came down to is I'm not sure how the properties of how things are 3D printed will work to the amount of strain. I think I mentioned that in the last installment. So I'm basically going for two very different approaches, all utilizing the same basic size structure as the gears that I purchased and am expecting sometime in March. The picture of that I'm using for the measurements of that original gear, which I will put up now, is what I'm basing both of these gear versions off of. So the first one, you can see it, I'm already finished with it. I basically stuck with the general parameters that they start you with in Tinkercad, and then basically just sized everything appropriately. This time I'm going for a finer approach, and you'll understand here in a minute. I kicked up the number of teeth in the gear. So this one will use more fine movement. I'm actually trying to emulate the shape of the metal gear that I purchased with this one, where the first one I went with less teeth. They're bigger and a little more aggressive to, like I said, to cover bases. I'm not sure how these are going to hold up under the strain of the Pachinko balls. So I figured I'd go for one that's going to have smoother action, but will, maybe behave better or worse than the coarser toothed one. I'm not sure. So yeah, that's, that's basically it. I just cover in the bases. So, as with the metal gears that I purchased, I figured if I kept the sizes as close as possible, if neither of the plastic ones work out, I can still continue to build the rest of the contraption, and the metal gears that I ordered should slot right into everything. So that's why I'm making sure that everything is height appropriate and whatnot to the gear I purchased. The hole that I'm putting in this one right now, I forgot to put it in the first one, but I'll correct that here in a minute, is the 7 millimeters. The gear is an 8 millimeter bore, but I'm going to use 7 millimeters for these because that's the actual size of the shaft, and since I'm designing these, I may as well make them fit. So I did. I had a devil of a time getting these centered, because they can't be off, and they still might be. I was still eyeballing a lot of that, so I don't know for sure whether or not it's going to cause issues until I print a couple of them off and give them a trial run. I still don't know how I'm going to give them a trial run. Honestly, at this point, I haven't put a whole lot of thought into that yet, but I'll figure something out, and that'll be obviously in a installment down the line. So what I'm doing now is making the hole that will be in the side that will go through the hole in the shaft. It's a 3 millimeter hole, so bear with what I'm doing here. It's kind of weird. I took a square and I made it the same size as the circle, and I was trying to line it up perfectly so that I could, center the cross hole, but I was having just a heck of a time. And so you can see I'm struggling. And so I decided to just not sweat it. And you'll see what I end up doing here in a sec. But, because as long as the hole goes straight through it close enough for me to line it up with the shaft on the motor and get a screw through it, that's all I really need. I mean, because honestly, it doesn't even need to be a screw. It can be one of those cotter keys, just anything that will keep the plastic and the shaft in the relative same place as it spins, so that it doesn't strip. So what I end up doing is just using the little part of the circle that's poking out, as you can see here, and then I built a couple of cubes. One to make sure that my height is correct or close enough to it, and then this one here, the bigger squares, to make sure that it's actually centered across and it looks good enough to me. So that's what I went with. And then, copied one off so I could put it in the thing, turned it into a hole, grouped everything together. I don't know why, but this session in Tinkercad, it was taking a long time. Now, this is time-lapsed 500%, so you don't get to appreciate, like I did, how long it was taking for my objects to group together. I mean, it was like a minute. Just, and I've made way more complicated groups than this, so I'm not entirely sure what was going on, if it was my computer or if it was Tinkercad or the internet. I don't know. But either way, that is them for the most part. They now have their cross hatches, so they're almost done. What I'm doing here is I'm adding a curve to the underside of that second gear, because it's so much less aggressive. It kind of had too much of a lip that I wanted to trust for overhanging, and free floating for my 3D printer. So I put a little ramp in there so that way it can build up gradually, and then I don't need to put support material in. I figured it was just something I could do easy, quick, and if it works, they can be free floating and I don't need to do support material, which inevitably messes things up, or can. So I tried to avoid that. Anyway, this is them, and on we go to the next step.